All right, hello and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I'm here today with Andrew and Jason Story, and I wanted to talk a little bit about GDC. It's coming up in just a couple weeks, but first there are a couple topics that I think we should dive into and just share real quick because they're kind of time sensitive. First off, I've actually got it right up here on the screen. Andrew, Magic Pigs Games has a couple games in the fresh asset sale, right? And how long is that lasting? A couple more weeks or a week or two?
Probably 4 days, 5 days.
Oh, that's it. Okay, so it's very short time. I'm gonna make sure you go check those out. What's in that that flash sale, if you don't mind?
So it's not flash sale. It's
fresh sale. Sorry, I keep saying flash instead of fresh.
Yeah, it's all newer content. So for me, it's the big monster collection, which you got the screenshot there, which 20 characters. It's an expensive package, but it's 50% off, so you're saving a lot. And then the latest monster bundle, which is 4 characters, less expensive, but they're all in Monster Collection 2. So if you're going to buy Monster Collection 2, don't buy the other. And then North Star Navigation is my other asset, which is the HUD, heads-up display, nav bar, overlays, screen overlays, and all that package. But then the sale itself is all, newer content. So they do this twice a year, and it's all basically new stuff. So what I like about it is it's often stuff that you don't get to see in other sales because it's only limited to stuff that was in the past 6 months or so. And then, who knows if these will ever be on a sale again. So
yeah, that's probably the best part about it. It's not things that you probably already have. It's a bunch of stuff. When I was looking through it, I was shocked. I was like, okay, I actually don't have most of these things. There were only a couple things in there that I actually had because most of them are really new. There was one that looked really exciting. I was grabbing the V tabs. Have you guys tried that out yet?
I saw that in your video you posted yesterday.
It looks really cool. I'll pull it up and screen share it. It's let's see if I can find it real quick. It's one that I think, assuming that it works as good as the video looks, it seems like it might change my my workflow just a little bit. Where is it? V tabs. Oh, I have it filtered to Magic Pigs Games only. Okay, let's do a quick screen share. I'm going to show everybody what it does and why I thought it was really cool because it's pretty freaking neat. Check this out. So, Story, you haven't seen this yet either, right?
I've not. No, I mean I've seen a lot of similar things. I'm not seeing this one though. I'm not sure.
So this one, they take a component, turn it into a tab, or let's go back to the beginning. This was the part that excited me the most. They just take a folder and bam, now the folder is a tab. You know how freaking useful that would be? You know how many times I would just have a folder where I want to have that be, locked there, but I don't want to go open a new project window, click over to it and then drag and lock it and then have that be there and then it gets messed up. But if we can just drag a folder over and it becomes a tab, seems really, really, really cool. So I'm going to grab this one today. It's on my list of there. I'll drop the link in chat too if anybody wants to check it out. It looks really cool.
Sounds like it should be a native feature.
Yes. And there's a couple other ones that this guy has too, and they seemed pretty cool, but this was the one that really stood out to me. The other ones are editor, like folder and hierarchy updates that look interesting. Yeah, like they're improvements, but this one seems, for me,
I admit my favorite thing about using those ones is looking at the source code to see which APIs they're using, because you have to use some of the more archaic ones to get some of that behavior. Because I look at it and I go, okay, I know how half of that stuff works, but some of it I'm like, I actually don't know what they're tapping into to get that. So it's always fun homework,
Yeah. And for anybody who didn't see the video part of it, it's just basically taking a folder or a component and then dragging it up to where you would normally drag a tab in Unity, where you can do your dockable tabs, and it just creates a new tab that's of that folder or of that component. And it's probably doing like, a properties window behind the scenes that it's locking there and naming or something, but it looks really cool. So anyway. Yeah, anyway, you go check that out. I dropped a link down in the description if anybody's interested. There were a couple other things. There was somebody mentioned in chat something that I wanted to call out because it's also coming up, which was the Unity sessions. They're doing 1-hour boot camps on Dots next month. You can sign up. I'll find the link and I'll drop it in the description so everybody can check it out if you haven't signed up for it. But it's a 4-day thing where they're going to go through and it sounds like kind of teach you how to use Dots, and you'll be able to follow along with the project. So I'm going to do it. It seems really cool to me. As long as I'm here, I'll be joining into those calls. I want to catch up on dots. It's been a while since I've been in on it. I wonder if Johnny. I'm sure Johnny will be there too.
They're
But yeah,
doing a
it seemed
few
cool.
good ones like that. They did a URP live stream thing a few days back, which was pretty good. You know, talking about the new scene, the one that has like 5 or 6 little teleport regions with the virtual space thing or whatever. It was pretty interesting. Granted,
Yeah, I was watching that too.
Yeah,
that looks
haven't
really
seen
cool. That one. And did you see the netcode for game objects one they did? It was probably close to a year ago, maybe 9 months ago.
I missed that one, but yeah, I mean, the bit I liked in this one is they talked a lot about things like their light cookies and various different features, which are a little bit newer. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that one was cool. It was interesting because there was actually new stuff in there. I didn't think that they had new things going into that sample, but then I learned about and realized that new scene at the beginning and a couple of the little features. The sample has been around for a while with some of the stuff shown off, but they actually
there was a couple of new areas and stuff as well to it.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I like signing up for those too, and they're super passive. You just sit there, listen and watch and absorb stuff, and there's pretty much almost no wasted time, and you can ask questions directly to the people who made this stuff, which is always super awesome. Anyway, today I wanted to again talk a little bit about GDC and a little bit of just general Q&A stuff from the audience. So if people have questions, game dev questions specifically, ideally game dev questions, feel free to ask them. If it's something else, we might answer that as well. So let's go over a couple of them. Has anyone, here's a question that popped up, and I'm just going to click on it. Has anyone used Microsplat? I haven't in a long time, but I did in the past when we needed to do things that the Unity terrain system didn't support. It looks really cool though. If I was building a game where I wanted to build out like a really cool customizable level in terrain, I would certainly look into it, at least consider it. For me, it always comes down to what the actual level builders and level designers want and are going to use and be proficient with more than anything else. But you guys, is it something you've used before?
I've not really had cause to use it, but I do know the guy who made it, Jason Booth. I don't know him personally, but we've chatted in a few events and places, and he's basically one of those like the classic angry old wizard type developers, you know, the ones who's like absolutely knows arcane magic from the old times of various different stuff and creates really performant, well-written code and make great stuff. So while I've not had cause to use it, I would have zero doubt that it's well made, well put together, and does a great job. So if I did ever have cause, I would 100% look at his stuff.
Yeah, I haven't used it yet either, but just looking at the videos, these are the videos that I saw and thought, ooh, I should use that one day. But for me, I'm always stuck in the I'll just use the demo scene from Nature Manufacture for now phase. And I just have zero. I used to start, I think, or at least while making a game, build out worlds at the same time, because that was part of the whole thing. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no, I'll build the world after I have all the other mechanics done. Like, I'm not going to do that until later. I don't need that yet. So I haven't yet used it, but it keeps getting bigger, it seems like. So maybe waiting is a good thing in that regard. By the time I do use it, there'll be more options.
Yeah, it does a lot now. The roads pack for it is on sale too. So yeah, if you have a need to build this kind of stuff, if you're building out levels and you're the person who's making the decisions on how those are done, it's definitely worth checking out that Gaia, and there are probably a couple other. What other good terrain options are there? Are there any other that are really popular other than Microsplat and Gaia that you know of?
There used to be Vegetation Studio, I think, but I don't know if that's still.
Others used to plug into that though, if memory serves. That
doesn't really do like the whole building though, right?
Maybe I just remember the biomes from that and thinking, oh, that sounds amazing. But everybody has biomes now. I think they were just the first, at least that I saw, that had this idea of just, oh, change the biome, click a button, now everything looks different, right? Because I definitely want seasons in my game. That's one of the things I would love to have, is actual seasons. And so the idea of being able to not change the terrain, but just change the underlying data that then changes the terrain sounds very good to me. But
yeah, and this is the one that I was thinking of, and I was said this. This is the thing I was thinking of. Microverse. This is the one that does the actual level building. The Splat one's for the terrain textures, materials, and stuff. Then this is for the actual level building part. I got the micros just confusing me now.
Yeah. I think I don't know which ones are straight terrain versus just shader, but nature renderer, terraformer, and vegetation engine are all ones I've seen. This is I just did a search for terrain on the asset store, really, but I've seen those. I don't know which ones rise to the level of like Gaia and Microsplat, Microverse rather, versus the rest. So
interesting. Oh yeah, terraformer. This one looked interesting too. It's not one I've actually used though. And 2D, I don't know anything on the 2D level building. I feel like I'm terrible at that. So there are a couple more questions. Why don't I just get into some of those? Here's another asset store question. What are popular characters at the moment? What do people really want? I don't know for sure, but my guess would be humanoids and like core player characters.
No, you're wrong. People want mushroom monsters, Jason.
It's all mushroom monsters. Well, you said that those are selling like hotcakes, right?
Yeah, the mushroom monsters.
If it's like free hotcake day.
Yeah, but I think you're probably right, character. So I think you can. This is probably like just a truism of the world. For characters, humans are going to be the most popular because when people are building a game, a very large number of them will need humans. Which style of human, that depends on the style of the game, but humans in general. And then you're going to get to the hero characters like dragons, horses, the more common things. And then you're going to go down the list. But basically, just think about how many people making roll the dice game are going to need that character. If more of them are going to need that character, then that's going to be a more popular character at the moment. If Skyrim or if Elder Scrolls 6 comes out and people are all into fantasy again, then dragons and mushroom monsters and other creatures like that will get a little bit more popular as people say, I want to make a game like that. If Western games get popular, maybe that will. If Pal World comes out, then maybe people will be more into that kind of character and Pokemon type characters.
Yeah, I'd take a wild guess that during the Pal World epidemic, there was a lot of those creatures suddenly sold a lot more than they usually do.
It makes me. I do wonder though what the trail is for that. Because obviously, like if you're going to make a Christmas game, you're not going to make it in December. You're going to make it in January or the January the year before or the summer, if you want it released. But then there's also the idea of just being inspired by Christmas. And so I'm on Christmas break and it's Christmas, so let me just fool around with the game. So I do wonder how much of it is like, ooh, I just saw this game, now I'm going to buy these assets to make a game like that. Or, ooh, I just saw this game, let me prepare, and then 6 months later I'll buy a game or assets that look like that. But I don't know.
But I guess that comes down to, if you want to be meanly cynical about it, it comes down to who's buying them for what reason. I would say a lot more people buy assets to make prototypes to see if they like the idea than they are people who are buying them for their finished game. And so realistically, you're not dealing with the long-term tail end people. You're dealing with the ones who are in the moment suddenly more jazzed about game development for the next week than they have been in the last 2 months because they're inspired by whatever game they're playing and they want to throw a prototype together. And then maybe 0.1% of 0.1% of that will go on to like push the prototype further. But at least for people getting into it, if you're trying to reach those kinds of people, then the answer is make things that are very easy to latch on to a trend, but like quick to drop in and sort of prototype and test ideas, because that's where most of the sales will come from, I imagine. People who are sort of in that peak excitement phase of whatever the new thing they're interested in doing,
Yeah.
I would just exactly expect that.
Lee wrote a follow-up that they're looking to build assets and sell, and that's why they asked. And so I would say build what you love, because if you're able to build something and you enjoy doing it, you're gonna do it for longer and you're gonna be better at it, and you're probably gonna end up selling more long-term. He also asked what a mushroom monster was, so there's a link to the best mushroom monster in the world, probably. I mean, let's be completely honest.
It's funny because it literally is, and it's one that like I I have liked for a very, very long. How long has this thing been around?
A long time. This was was this the first? This may have been the first character released in.
Yeah, because I remember we wanted to use this one in a game I was making with Brad like 10 years ago. I think we started making it. I was like, yeah, we got to put the mushroom monster in. They actually took it in and then retextured him and made him all glowy and stuff.
Yep. And it includes the Substance Painter file, so you can completely retexture in Painter if you want.
I assume that's probably how they did it. Yeah, the artist they made their own custom version of it. The team is like totally gone now and changed, so different artists. But it was very cool. Yeah, I love this thing. It's neat. That and the mimics, the chests. Those are just too cool.
The mimics is you need chests.
Oh, that's what I should put into the battle game. I don't know. Did I show you guys the new battle game yet?
You mentioned it. I haven't seen it.
Oh yeah. Shoot! Well, let me show it to you, and then I'll show you. Like, there's actually a perfect spot for those chests, because I was thinking I was putting in pickups, power ups, and there's no reason that one of them couldn't, like, they can just be bad guy chests too, or power ups.
You can just turn the mimic off, and now it's just a chest filled with gold or gems or empty.
Yeah, and start them off as that, and then just add the feature where sometimes they turn into a mimic and attack you. Wait, I'm loading up the project now. So let me get that link in there too for the monsters, the mushrooms. There we go.
What'd you say, Story?
So you have a version of that chest without the teeth and stuff. It can just be a normal chest.
Oh yeah, it actually the package was chests first, and then we add the mimic later. So I do wonder, maybe people don't realize that it's just chests.
I truly thought it was just a monster. Yeah. So honestly, I think again goes into the marketing thing. Like to sell the idea of a proper mimic, to me, it would be the idea that you'd have like almost like a little video of 4 chests, and the character would open the first one, open the second, and then comedy rule of 3 is the third one turns into a mimic, and then you've got like a big creature jumps out. That could be the kind of selling point for it.
The title of the package is Mimic Chests and Regular Chests with Golden Gems. AAA.
To be fair, I haven't seen it in a while. Mostly it's been whenever you brought it up, so I've not looked at the actual chest set. So,
but yeah, lots of chests, lots of options, lots of looks, and mimics. But you can turn the mimics off.
Nice.
Yeah. So this question about layoffs and all that, funding indies, isn't my only understanding of this is that post-pandemic, pretty much all, not all, but a lot of funding for all companies has dried up a little bit. Wait, suddenly I'm not hearing anything.
I think Jason's muted.
Ah, okay. So it's not me.
I don't think he's realized that this scene doesn't have audio for himself.
No, I'm just muted. That's all. Okay. I was muted because I was eating a chip. I was just agreeing with you. I've been hearing from at least from one person, and whoops, wrong one, and from sorry, I'm clicking the wrong thing, and from the internet for a couple places I've been reading where apparently a lot of the publishers have been looking for smaller investments and smaller studios, and they've been looking a lot more at those under $1 million, $500,000 projects instead of the $2 to $5 million ones. I don't know how widespread that is, but
also again, I'd caution people to think a little bit in terms of life cycle of games, right? Especially big budget games. We're talking like 4 to 6 year life cycles, and so if you were a game studio and games were on the up like they have been for a very long time, and then there was a pandemic and other people were indoors, and you're like, cool, invest all of the money in all of the things, this is great, this is an endless cycle of possible money, and then all of it suddenly bottoms out, people aren't playing games as much, the pandemic's over, people are like, okay, I mean, now we're seeing those kinds of layoffs because it was an inflated sense of development and cost anyway, and it's also the market that's kind of drying up from that perspective. So given that cycle, what we're seeing now is sort of more the consequences of 3 years ago, more so than it is specifically a particular indictment of what's happening right now. That's not to say there isn't issues and things, but what I'm saying is if you are getting into game dev as a thing now, you're playing the game for 5 years from now, right? You're not playing the game for now, really. So I wouldn't worry too much about the current state of that. The truth is, the people who are, in my opinion, probably most worse off are mid-tier developers in indie-ish studios when you've got people who are kind of long-term professional devs who are out of work, and they're more likely to take lower jobs than they normally would. And so if there's like a mid-tier job that has an opportunity to hire someone fantastic way under their value, they probably will. And so I imagine people who are starting out like legitimately in their only 2 to 4 years into their game dev career are probably going to have the hardest time. But in terms of like making your own stuff and whatever, honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. I could be wrong. It could get worse, but I think as it stands, I don't think the current state of that is a good indicator of the market for games. Especially that we had the best year for games last year of all time. Like that's the amount of huge games everyone loved.
Yeah.
And so again, go on that cycle. We went through like a falling downwards. Now we have an increase again. The idea that people aren't going to be hyped for more big games, kind of, I see probably a rise coming sometime soon.
And video games are still, the market is way bigger than all movies and TV combined. Like that's still a number that boggles my mind because we got the Academy Awards that everyone watches. Oh my gosh, look at these stars. But then we don't get the same type of hype with video games stars for some reason, unless you're a super nerd with that. But 10 years ago, when I first started getting into this, I was a little distraught because I would go to Unite, I would go to GDC, and I kept hearing all these people say the indie apocalypse is upon us, and it's over for all indies. So I'm wondering how that's going. Is that happening still?
I don't know.
I don't think. Yeah, it is interesting because like it does sort of have boom and bust cycles. It seems for whether people are into AAA or into indie or whatever. It does. I don't know. There's been a lot of disappointing AAAs in the last few years, and something like Baldur's Gate will inject a lot of enthusiasm into the area, but like it's so not repeatable that it's not exactly a good example. It's sort of more of it's like getting just a free hype injection into the industry. I don't know how that'll actually play out though. And then you've got things like Star Citizen, not Star Citizen, the other one, Starfield, which was just an absolute waste of energy. So who knows what effect that has? I don't know. It's a tough one. I have no concept of where things are going because it's such a mercurial industry.
Yeah, I think I was being a little facetious with the question because obviously indies are still making money and you can still make indie games but I do feel like while there are always ups and downs and eventually a market will fall, and eventually a market will go crazy, most of the predictions of doom and gloom or of, a gold rush will fizzle out very quickly. And you're going to get the standard trends of rising and falling with the ups and downs. It's a sawtooth pattern, of course, and all that. But I think there's still a market for indies and there's going to be more of a market for indies. And with all the various AI things, it increases the opportunities for indies to make products and experiences and games that are really compelling quickly and by themselves or with a small team. So I think we're going to continue seeing a value for indies, but it's going to continue being very difficult. Making games isn't easy. We all realize that once you get into it. And
I would say my prediction, if I had to make one, would be I expect we're going to see a lot more RPG games in 4 years because of the confluence of events, which is a couple of popular ones came out. The ability for people to create lots of assets, specifically text and dialogue and character art and things, is going to increase exponentially. The idea that people could not even small groups, but almost single-handedly produce an actual large-scale role-playing game is getting smaller and smaller. The ability to do that is much more appealing. Will most of them suck? Most likely, but I do think we're going to see a lot of them, and that excites me because even if 90% of them suck, there's so few fun, like, dialogue-based driven games that are especially smaller scale. There's just so few of those that I'd be excited to see more people take a swing at it. I still think writing needs a big leg up in the games industry, and so it would be nice to see people at least trying it. And while I think most of them will be crap, like I said, it means that it'll be easier for people to go, oh, this is popular now, but they're all crap. So now maybe people who actually care can jump in, and then that means there'll be more investment in the industry, more structure in that, and there might actually be just one or two good ones. Because I feel kind of annoyed that after Baldur's Gate, like there's nothing else that I can really play that matches that or is similar, and so I'm just kind of like, cool, like I want another game that's a story that I can play for 200 hours that like feels meaty and newer and whatever, and it's so yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
but that's just me as a consumer. That's not a prediction from anything other than how I think it's going to go.
Sure. And I figure a lot of indies also, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think a lot of people, if I want to be a successful indie developer, I don't necessarily need to make a hit and, make millions of sales. I just need to be able to keep doing it and be confident and comfortable that every year I'm going to make enough money to keep living and keep, saving for retirement, maybe buy a nice vacation or something. A lot of indies don't necessarily need to be the biggest hit. So smaller games that maybe are a little crappy, but enough people like them, might be enough to keep.
That's also surprisingly low, by the way. That's one of those things that's like a little asterisk. So most games make very little money. That's the whole scary, sad truth is, like I said, many games make less than 3,000 under their whole lifetime, right? Like that's crazy money. But the fact is, to actually survive with a game industry, like there's lots of games studios who have never had a quote unquote hit ever, but they can perfectly survive comfortably with a full-time job to pay the bills and do everything else because they didn't like blow their budget on something huge or waste a lot of time. If you're investing under 2 years in a game, ideally a year to kind of do small things, and you increase your scale of your games and products relative to that sort of marker, honestly, you need less than 250,000 ish to really just like to consider pay yourself back, pay for all the assets, do all the marketing, and survive. And to get that, that's not that many people in the grand scheme of how marketing in games works. If you have an entire year lead up to get yourself 40,000 to 60,000 people on your, to buy your game, that's actually not that bad, given all the people in the world buying all the different games of different types. It more comes down to, did you do the marketing? Did you get the appeal from people and whatever? And that usually is less to do about the quality of the game and more about how early did you start marketing and how engaged you are with your community and how much you build up that sort of structure and hype so when the game releases. So again, like, this isn't to say it's not impossible, but it's more a factor of understanding your audience versus the investment you're spending. But if you sequester yourself for 2 years to make something, then come out and spend 2 months marketing it and then expect to make your money back, it's not going to happen. And so that's usually why this stuff fails, because there's no lead up, there's no expectation, there's no sort of setting the groundwork, and that tends to be the real killer.
Yep. I forget what exactly my game The Barbarian made, but it wasn't that much. I want to say it was somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 total, which includes the $5 to $10 a week it settled on for quite a few years before Apple finally removed it.
And that's the other thing too, is that many people I know who they've told me many times over, the trick isn't to make one successful game, it's to make lots and lots of games. Each of them will hold themselves up and basically keep the lights on, and then all you need is one of them to just go viral. And it's kind of like rolling dice, right? Like, the trick isn't to build the best game using some sort of magical formula. It's to just build enough stuff that something hits. Again, everybody talks about Lethal Company is taking over the world, but Lethal Company is like their 7th game. And now people are going back through their backlog and like finding all their games fun now, but like that wasn't, you just have to wait till something hits, and the whole luck favors the prepared thing. You can set yourself up for that, but the truth is, if your goal is really to get successful, aim for each game to only keep the lights on, and then as soon as one of them gets a bite, that's when you can stop, put all your energy into doing that thing and push harder.
Repeat what you found. Yeah. I mean, I think that's good advice all around. Keep doing stuff that works, and then once you find something that really works, repeat. Keep repeating.
And I'm sure Story, with the ones you're thinking of, they all kept their scale relatively low too, right? And didn't scope creep too much.
Yeah, and also even just people. Like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, my game's getting big. I better start hiring or getting lots of stuff." And it's like legitimately, some of the most successful games in the world had studios of under 4 people, right? Like I wouldn't. Once you get to 12, you're managing a big project. You've got people and like salaries and stuff, and that gets crazy. Like it sounds like a small number. Oh, 12 people. It's like, no, 12 people is a lot to manage when you're dealing with something
That's
like a project.
millions of dollars a year, probably.
Yeah. So
that's what's pricey.
you want to stick with like people talk about, oh, I can't do it as a solo dev. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be a 500 people studio either. Honestly, the sweet spot's 3 or 4. Yeah, perfect. 3 or 4 is like a really good number because it means you've got enough people that there can be somebody who's more dedicated in the art direction, somebody more dedicated towards the marketing and production and social team management, and then some people doing development, and you'll have enough there that you can really like work on it, you know?
I like that the bot here just just scolded Zach for caps on using the commands on the battler. That's funny. So this was the thing I was mentioning though, Andrew. So it's up on screen right now for anybody who can't see it, where the characters move around and you just do / commands to move them, and then they can battle and kill each other. And I was thinking the chests here would be cool. Right now, the pickup is that little circle, the little gray sphere.
Okay.
And it doubles your damage and heals you to full health for like doubles your damage for like the next 5 attacks or something like that. But yeah, I figured a chest would be better.
Yeah, loot drops.
Need actual map art too and stuff. Like I used a little plus. This is literal coder art. I drew a plus in Paint and then saved that off as a texture and made it repeatable. It's like I need something really simple that just shows them exactly where they are on the grid, where they can kind of line up. And
it's when you were looking for a grid. Okay, yeah, I guess.
Well, kind of like maybe not necessarily a grid, but so that you knew like how many positions up somebody is from you, or to the left, or whatever, and you could tell without having to try to guess. So, like, I think like blocks, like those CoHosts ones. Go ahead.
The problem with that, so it's just a general thing about Gestalt theory and the theory of relative relations on things. A lot of it can be very hard to tell because what you'll get that sort of like eye flickering effect where it's very hard to gauge distance with a grid shape like this. So lines usually help, but the trick is you need some differentiating factor. That's why one of the best ways to do something like this is to have every second row or column be a slightly tinted color, because what that does is it gives you a spatial relation, and that's what tables do a lot, right? If you have a large data set in a table, every second row will have a slightly tinted color, and that gives you a very quick way to jump somewhere and then step up or down. And so if you were to make it like, how do I tell my distance count? I wouldn't even go full grid. I would just have a generally faded set of like interspersed rows.
Yeah, and you could do thicker lines or just a line on every 5. So people can just go over 5, 10.
Yeah.
But yeah. I was going to ask why you didn't use like an AI to make one, but that makes a lot more sense because you had a very, very specific purpose, and that would be annoying to get an AI to do that very specific outcome.
Yes. I tried to get AI to give me grids, and it gave me all kinds of terrible things that weren't what I wanted.
You know what you could do? You could get it to create one tile, and then there's the old classic trick of go to something like Photoshop, create a 3x3 grid, put the same image in each of the places, and then use the generative fill to try to merge the corners, and so you end up with a repeating tile.
Yeah, that would be cool. I was thinking I might just go with those Cubos bricks though on the asset store. Have you seen those?
No,
I don't.
I've used them before. It's like they're like KUBOS. I've used them a couple times. They're not the most performant, but it doesn't really matter. I just need to do a couple hundred bricks. But they're like lots of cool colors, and I figured it could do like some patterns and designs. Maybe make the bricks matter on something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever I've had to do this, if it's been prototypes, I've always used the Gridbox prototype materials because they're really quick and easy to use. You've seen them a million times on stuff.
Yeah.
Or if I'm doing my own stuff, what I like to do is just create a literal mesh box of some kind, some greebling or details on the side, and then I would just create an array, a matrix array of positions, and just do a single draw batch, and you draw a batch yourself of each of the types, and it's like 4 lines. It's pretty performant, and it'll draw the whole thing. And what's cool about that is if it's built default have a scriptable object and it's just drawing it each frame, you can literally go into the scriptable object and change the tile IDs and numbers. It'll quickly toggle them. So it gives you a very quick way to like efficiently move stuff around, you know?
Yeah, I might do something similar. I'm less worried about the performance side, but I like the speed of editing part. So I may end up doing something like that. I mean, I only don't care about performance because it's running on my desktop here only when live streaming, and not sending it to anybody who's running it on anything else. So it doesn't matter. But I like the editing part of that. Seems kind of handy.
Well, I liked it because what I would do is I would create a seed number, or I would basically type a string, turn the string into a hash code, use the hash code as the seed for the randomizer, and then I would basically play with it a lot until I get something I like and have it re-spit out the new seed it's kind of got for what it's doing. And then I would just use that to generate things real quick. And once I had something fun, I could then repeat. So yeah, for the prototyping of like setting something up you like, that was very quick and fun.
Yeah, I think it'd be handy. You just have a button there to go next all the way through, or a slider or whatever, and then type in the number. That actually could make an interesting video on seed stuff too. I might, maybe I'll make a video out of it, pop something similar to that in here for the world generation. Just do random world generation with seeds, because I think a lot of people still don't really understand that. By the way, if anybody wants to join in on the little battle thingy, you just have to do a / command and it'll move. It's WASD and F. F is fire, WASD is move in the obvious directions. And then when you die, you can actually respawn just by doing a new command. So if you're dead, you can come back in right now. There's nothing special though that happens other than you can roll around and blast each other for now. But I'll add some more stuff later. How do you leave? You get killed. That's it. There's no way to exit other than dying.
Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah. How does this work with the lag in the stream?
That's why there's a 30-second wait for commands. So it waits for commands, and then after that, it waits another 10 seconds, and then it does the reading of chat, queues up all those commands. The yellow commands are the ones that you have queued up. The white ones are the ones that it's going to run this round once it starts up. So all I do is turn it yellow and italicize it.
Interesting.
My text animator is failing miserably, though. I don't know if you guys can see that, like the number at the end. Only the last part of my text.
Oh,
like the E. Yeah. So I don't know what was going on, but something with my runtime string generation of it and having the tags in there is offsetting everything. It wasn't working right. So I got to figure out. I don't know if it's a bug in there or if it's something that I did wrong, but I didn't want to spend too much time debugging it because it wasn't something I cared about.
Got it. It's an interesting concept.
I thought so. Just a little bit of fun. Let people have an interactive way to move around fire, and then give them different abilities and stuff. Items to go pick up and all that. Thought it
I'm
would
just so sorry for people who want to ask a question because they're gonna get buried.
No, I've been starring the questions though. So if people are asking questions, I've been marking them with a star, and I've got them off to the side so we can go through a couple of them. In fact, why don't we? Let's pop a couple of them up. Although there was one comment here that I wanted to call out. Mark said we should make it ask a Unity related question. They have to answer correct. They get to move into the action. I was thinking it might be cool to do like quiz questions in there that if you answer, maybe it gives you like a power up or something. So just in chat, it could ask a question, and then if you get the right answer, you get a power up or a heal or something. It would be kind of fun. All right, let's go into some of these other questions though. So I've been working on a 2D underwater game. One of the things we want is to be able to break a wall and have water flow in, affecting objects, etc. Any suggestions and plugins or systems we should check out? And I know there is one that does this really good, but I can't remember the name of it. Do you happen to remember it, Andrew? It's like Fluid something. Fluidio or
Fluvio or something.
Fluvio. That sounds right.
Is that?
I think that's it. Let's see. But I know there was a really good. Okay. What is it?
I can't find Fluvio.
No, that's not it. It's something similar though. There's it's 2D water one.
Infinity River.
What
Fluxy?
is the name of it?
That's 2.5D. Never mind.
No. I'm looking through the. Yes. If anybody in chat remembers the name of it, let me know. It's probably
Don't
under
forget they are
cool.
looking for 2D, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 2D. Oh yeah, 2D.
Yeah. 2D
So maybe-
specific, and there was a really cool 2D one. It was like on one of the sales recently, and it does like filling up of water volumes and all that stuff. Oh man, I don't know. Well, I thought I knew it, but I cannot find it.
2D fluid. Yeah, I don't know.
Let me double check. Yeah, I will have to do some research then and see what the name is. I wish Pal was here. He probably knows. I feel like he knows
It also
exactly what it
depends
is.
on what, like which part of it you're trying to do, because the interesting thing about things like skyboxes and clouds and water is they're often like 17 different problems, and they all look like one cohesive thing, but
Mhm.
like the rendering for it is different, and the physics for it is different. From the collision interaction for it is different from the body sim portion of it, and each one sometimes they work together, but fundamentally it's different data structures doing different things with different sort of problems. So if you're just trying to like move particles, that's one thing. If you're trying to get it to like flood into something and cause a different effect, oftentimes that's more a question of create some kind of polygon or shape and then use calculate the body mass for something inside that space, whatever. So yeah, it's hard to know. It really depends on which part of that problem you're solving, and if it's all of it, then the answer is I don't know which asset has the whole sort
Yeah.
of system.
This game 2D water kit had I'm looking at the demo video. It's 2D. Looks like it does lots of different game types. I don't know if it does exactly what you're looking for, but maybe that's.
Oh, I don't know. This other one I just linked to is a water simulation one. I think that might be more in line with what they're thinking. I shouldn't think of like the standard old. There's water going down. You cut areas and water falls more. It looks like that one kind of does it. But I know there's another one. I just don't know for sure if it does what you want. And I would search for things like fluid simulation and liquid simulation and 2D liquid, 2D fluids and stuff like that to find something on there. And if anybody in chat happens to know of a good one, just let us know. I'm curious. Let's see. Let's go on to the next question here, which was, how much do pre-made games on the asset store drive the market? And I wanted to pop this up partially because when I was looking at the asset store sale, I noticed that there were a lot of like pre-made game packs now. There was a Slither IO style one. There's a bunch of multiplayer ones and some single player game packs. And it kind of inspired me like, hey, maybe I should make a single player template or single player game pack or something like that.
I wonder if people buy that. Like, it's always found that fascinating because to me they just do not appeal to me at all.
Oh, really? I always thought that they would appeal to people a lot. Well, maybe to beginners, not you.
It's the asset flip it's the on purpose asset flip. It's the ultimate asset flip, I suppose, right? Like the Snake Wars is the top right there. I think that's when you were talking about. It's half off. Yeah. And that looks like a complete game. Like, okay, you could just publish it or change the art out and then publish it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know what you're doing with ad revenue and all that, then it seems like a relatively decent investment for.
That is fair. I could see like the people who do those game websites and stuff where it's just ad based or apps where it's all ad based could do it. But I also see it for like beginners. I mean, for that one, obviously it's beginners with a good chunk of cash, but just beginners in general who want to make a specific type of game and have no idea how to get started, like a TCG game or any of these different types of things. Well, again, the cheaper ones, at least, I can see them doing it. I mean, they're the kind of thing that I would have grabbed. Like, hey, I can grab an RPG pack for $100 or $200, and I build a full RPG. Before I knew how to make an RPG on my own, that would have been super appealing for me.
I've seen people also use them for mini games in games. For example, back in the VR days or whatever, people would use this or take BioShock, right, where you had the water puzzle for the hacking mini game. People used to do stuff like that. They'd basically pick one of those and use it as a arcade machine in their game or part of some internal puzzle or a lockpick puzzle or something.
Yeah. if you scroll
Yeah, I
down,
think that works really well. Assuming that the little mini game is well isolated, which a lot of the time they are.
Yeah, scroll down some. There's 3 on 2 rows down from what you're looking at. It's Candy Smith and Game Vanilla both have like a lot of those casual games templates that seem to sell. I mean, 24 ratings seems pretty good for the
998 hearts.
Yeah, and then the one on the left, the Card Craft, it looks similar to the TGC engine by IndieMark that's further up that you saw, but there's a new one. I noticed this just earlier this week because it looks like Hearthstone basically, and I'm like, well, that seems like a very compelling thing to buy. I suppose the big fear is, especially if you are a newer user, is you won't know how to customize or fix things. So that is the danger of buying these. Is it extensible? Does it have a bug that the producer didn't realize existed because they never actually published the game, but as long as you're either brave enough or knowledgeable enough to understand those, it seems like a really good way to jumpstart and get something out faster.
Like that's the main thing that I definitely think. Like, for example, there's one up the top left somewhere, horror FPS kit. I picked that up for a project I was working on with somebody because we wanted to demonstrate an idea, and it was literally like, it has so much stuff in it. It has an insane amount of features that out of the box you can test. Like, if you're trying to demonstrate something narratively and you're like, I just want to like write a little bit of a narrative beat and have a couple of characters interact or something, and I don't want to have to write like putting the fuses in the fuse box to do the thing, to activate the door, to get the key, to do the thing that has the light switch. Like, all of that's just there. Now, would I actually write it myself for my own project? Yes, but like, to prove the point, that's such a small investment that you can spin something up and have 80% of what you were trying to do in a maybe not how you do it way very, very quickly. I think the problem with the broad category of templates is they imply they're all the same thing, when I think project foundation is not the same as example of how systems interact, is not the same as prototype framework, is not the same as starter kit or whatever. Each one of these kind of does a slightly different thing. And this one, to my surprise, I was kind of like, I've seen a lot of bad horror games on various storefronts and played by YouTubers, and this is better than all of those.
It looks better than a lot of them.
Yeah, like out of the box, if you were making, for lack of a better word, a cash grab horror game, if you started with this, you'd already have more systems than most of those games actually have. Admittedly, I have issues with this in terms of it's clunky in places, and the UI, the binding system is a bit rough, and the way the raycast thing works is not how I would do it. And there's a couple of other bits I would change.
It's even got mini games.
Yeah, it's got quite a lot of features. It's even got a jump scare system. If you want to just out of the box have like invisible trigger boxes with like fear counters and jump scares and all of that's in there. So it's a very, again, I'm not affiliated at all. Like, I actually think I was just very surprised with how many features were in it relative to if you were making that kind of game, it has pretty much everything you'd need. It has like zip lines. It has batteries you can put into torches and things, and like, it has like 6 different kinds of light source providers, whether you're using like old-timey lanterns versus torches versus whatever. It's got VCRs you can put videos on. It's got all of the things that those games have, right? So but again, to my point, it depends what your goal is. And in my case, I wanted to like explain a concept to somebody, and I could just spin this up, do the bits I needed, and press play, and it would be like, it starts. We have the thing we need.
It sounds like it should be more than $50 to me.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing holding this back is the fact that it's themed as horror only, and people probably don't like. I would have never looked at this had you not mentioned it, because I would have just assumed it was going to be a couple characters and a simple FPS, not an entire.
The marketing is the marketing is garbage, to be honest. And also as well, even from a thing, horror is it really isn't a horror system; it's an interaction system.
Yeah, it's really like an interactive first-person adventure game kit, right? Like it's more of that.
It has things like, it has ladders. It has things like camera sway, like the proper, like, you can create template sets for camera movement for the arms based on which devices you're holding and stuff. But all of that's kind of Either the point is, like, despite all of that, the part that interests me is the idea that you could make a whole lot of different game things with it. But the problem I have is all of those features are just a little bit undercooked in certain areas. For example, it's fine for the horror genre because I think that's the reason why I think it's the horror genre is I think it's a bit clunky, and quite frankly, the horror genre is a little bit more forgiving on that. But if you build yourself as a first-person shooter type thing, people want smoother movement and smoother whatever, and this is one of those ones that leans into that sort of heavier, clunkier, swaying whatever. Not to say you couldn't do that, but I think they do know their market in terms of it is the right market for it, but it does have a lot more features than just horror. So it's a tough line to walk marketing-wise.
Yeah, I feel like they could just have an adventure themed version of it, like have a core kit and then just have some different themes on it. Probably, I mean, I don't know for sure, but it seems like it would make it sell even better. But that looks really cool.
Yeah, it's certainly like I want to bring it up because I tried a bunch of those different template kits just out of curiosity of what people were doing, and that was the only one that, like, above all, impressed me relative to what I expected from it.
All right, let's go on a couple more. Anyone excited for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2?
The last one I played was Final Fantasy VI, called Final Fantasy 3 in the US. I did play Final Fantasy 5, but it was all in Japanese. My friend brought it from Taiwan, and I cut the back to make it work in my SNES. I didn't like the 3D Final Fantasy. It confused the shit out of me. Also, I didn't have a PlayStation at the time. I think it was PlayStation that came out on. So, nope, I'm not. Sorry, the bull. That's just my. I'm sure somebody else is, though.
I'm sure Salim is. I have to hit him up. Okay, let's see. Looks like George bought an asset to learn from it, which I have done myself too. A lot of the time when I do that, though, I find that like I got the asset, I went through the whole thing, and it was like one method that I was really wanting to find and understand and learn that was holding me back. So it's been helpful for that before, but it usually ends up being like one little thing if I'm learning from it. Otherwise, I just take it and pop it in there. All right, let's see. There were a couple other questions that I had queued off. Let me see what those were. Okay. What is the best way to market a rigged character, and do they need facial animations and facial controls? Andrew, I'm going to aim this one at you. I'm going to guess that they probably don't necessarily. Facial animation and facial control is probably a relatively low demand. Probably not very many people care that much about it. But what do you think? Or did you freeze? I don't see Andrew moving at all. And we'll come back to this one in a second. Story, you're still here, right?
I'm still here, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Do you know of any tutorials for creating spline-based roads on terrain?
Am I moving?
Oh, he's back.
So my internet has been. I think they're working on the internet because, as you know, I've been having internet issues in the past many months. So I keep getting cut out. That's the second time I've noticed it. Sorry. So it's are we still talking about that?
We'll go back to the question about characters.
The short answer is they don't need it. It's probably nice to have it rigged for it. A lot of the animation packs, so with a humanoid character, a lot of people are going to use the animation assets from the asset store. They don't have animation, and we had to make a video showing people how to close the mouths because turns out if you have a rigged mouth and no animation for it, it defaults to open for some reason. So all the characters are like walking around with their mouths open. And actually in my game, The Barbarian, you could see the character close up, they had their mouth open. I didn't know how to fix it back then. But you couldn't see the characters close up, so it didn't matter. So you don't need it, but it's nice. The real question is, how much do you want to support that with the marketing? You know, if you're going to market all this facial rig and the animation, then you're going to have to support it. You're going to have to provide a Q&A for it. People are going to ask you, how do I make it do this? How do I make it do that? So, you know, there's some producers on the store who don't even provide a demo scene. Some don't even provide animations. They just, this is the character. It's humanoid rigged. That's it. That's the extent of it. I provide a whole lot of stuff for Infinity PBR stuff, but sometimes I regret it because I have to support it. And there's a lot of questions I get that I'm like, this is really out of scope for it, but I understand they're missing some key aspects.
Also, even like hottest of hot takes on that is the truth is, and it's one of those like once you realize it and see it, you'll never unsee it. look how many games use masks or helmets for their characters.
Yeah.
And this is like, the thing is, it's not even like a negative, because as a designer, it means you don't have to solve the problem. You're not rubbing up against the whole issues with the uncanny valley, and it's easier to make new characters by just creating a singular new mask. And it also is better for branding, because a good defined mask is better and more recognizable than generic human face number 77. So the fact of the matter is, in 85% of cases, at least for your NPC style characters, it's just easier all around for a designer and developer to just use some kind of masks and things. Now, if it's a very dialogue based game, you might want to, but I would say with absolute certainty, unless it was literally the point of the game, I would, in every single scenario someone asks me, I would say pick a helmet or something, unless it's like a cartoony game or something, legitimately, because it's just the amount of downstream work. It's one of those things where, like, a small decision. Another designer talked about this before with the idea of slopes in their game. There's a reason a lot of Terraria-esque style games don't have anything kind of slope. It's all blocks. You have to jump up single blocks. Not all of them do it, but a lot of them do, because that's one of those examples of a tiny decision leads to exponential complexity, because you're not just solving the floor grounding problem, you're solving placement on slopes, and then sliding, all the other stuff that goes downstream with that. So the question becomes, it's not like, would it be cool? Of course it would be cool. It's, ask yourself the value proposition relative to the exponential Pandora's box of work you're producing. And to me, I just don't think in most games talking mouths add enough. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes they're almost worse. They actually, in a lot of cases, can like make your game distracting. Take Mass Effect Andromeda. That game tanked because of the robotic looking faces, right? Like it actually made the game actively worse. So again, it's a fine line. If you have a really good animator, sure. If you've got really, like, if you have lots of details and movements and whatever, sure. But for most people, just put a mask on your character and like get to work on the important stuff.
That's simpler. A similar question as, do you need doors in your game? And for the game New World, I know they decide, nope, we don't have doors in this world. They just don't exist. And then a lot of games, like if you're going to hand off an item from one character to the other, never show their hands. Just don't show the hands in the handoff. Otherwise, you have to deal how to show the handoff, and that's not what you want to deal with. So.
Yeah, I feel like the more important thing for characters for the asset store specifically is having sets that go well together. Because when people want to buy stuff, they want to be able to see that it's not going to, like, there's enough stuff in there that they can use that for their game prototype or whatever, or their section of the game that they want to use it for. And it's not just like one thing and then something totally different and something else totally different. They got to be kind of cohesive so you can use them together as a game asset. Like,
well, this is to expand on that. This is the biggest difference between producing a character for a game and producing a character for the asset store. If you're producing a character for a game, you have a document that tells you what is going to show and what's not going to show, and you're not going to make what's not going to show. For the asset store, you don't know how people are going to use this. So if you have a masked character, then anyone who says, well, I want a face in my game, doesn't want that. They're going to say, does the mask come off? And you're going to be like, oh no, it's hard code because so many games have masks. So now you got to think about that. Do you want to broaden your market and deal with that, or do you want to just not broaden your market? The number one question people ask, though, for humanoids is, can I equip other wardrobe with it? And the answer is no, you can't. You can equip other wardrobe that one producer has created for that one humanoid body. That's why Infinity VR has the humanoids with the wardrobe packs. You can mix and match. You can do that. That's great. But you can't use other wardrobe unless it's a hat or a shield. You can't use it. If it attaches to a bone, you can use it. But if it doesn't attach to a bone, you're going to have to redo the rig. And so maybe you can rework the rig. Maybe there's an ass out there that can do this. I don't think there is. But the answer is no, you can't. And that's the number one thing for a rigged human character. People are going to say, can I change the clothes? Can I take this off? Can I add that? Can I use it with this other character from another producer? And until there's a
by the way, that's also another like asterisk for you as a designer and developer. It's another reason why you want masks, because if you do hit a problem like that, and you have another similarly shaped body double character from something else, you can put a mask on them and it looks the same from a lot of scenarios. If you've got a character with a particular modeled face, to put that face on a different character or a different body or a different whatever, you have a lot of work to do in Blender or whatever. The fact of the matter is, as long as your silhouettes remain similar and you have some differentiating factor on the faces, your life will be a lot easier for a lot of the work you're doing. Again, if you are a modeler or you have people on your team that can do it, different story. But for most people, like, it's such a can of worms. Once you go down this road and start making these decisions, thinking, wouldn't my character be cool if they had slightly off standard, dimensions? You're like, cool, you've now just ruined. So the amount of work you have to do now is 10x in every possible scenario.
That was what they did with Gagaya's character, right? They made like, instead of it being a full size character, he was a little short guy. So then it had to have all custom animations for everything instead of using a standard one, so you could swap out the character.
And don't get me wrong, I think it looks cool. I actually like that.
Oh, it looked great. Yeah, great if it was a custom game going out. Yeah.
But that's why, again, the other part of it too is, we talked about this before, Andrew. Oftentimes in games, like, of all of the characters, people will have their protagonist paid for, because you can fill a world full of generic character models, but you'll want to spend your 20 to 60,000 for like your character for your game, because they're the thing. They're the posters, the images, the videos that the character plays with, all that stuff. So realistically, that's like not a small thing. That's why a lot of the games, again, once you start to see this stuff and understand the mechanics behind it, there's a reason why loads of games have a different dimensioned or shaped protagonist, but everybody else is vaguely the same race or species or monster or creature or something. And you're often having my character isekai transformed into other world. Why? Because you can put the energy into making a really expressive set of custom animations for your character, because you have to anyway for their attacks. But everyone else in the world can use the much cheaper and much simpler character models and shapes and things like that. And so a lot of these are very like cleverly driven design choices.
Yeah.
I want to call out one other tip too for the asset store that at least encourages me to buy things, which is having variations pre-made for me, so that I can use, like, if there's, like, let's say it's an orc. If there's an orc, or there's a orc with 10 variations, even if the variations are just that you changed the color of the armor a little bit, the 10 variations is probably going to win. If there's a little tiny variation on there too, like you've got the sub meshes that you can just turn on and off, just a couple of those that add some variation there, that goes a long way, because then suddenly you can populate out a full area with this model, and you get that whole, it fixes some of the problem of not having enough of a character, or enough characters that match the art set. If you have enough variation of single characters, you can kind of mix and match those and fill in a lot of space. So it's one of the things that I feel like it's low effort too, isn't it, Andrew? Relative? Relative to creating a new character, it's a lot easier to just add some customization and texture sets, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we're doing a little bit of work to make the wardrobe modular. Again, it does mean you're going to have the underlying body structure modeled and textured, and that adds all this sort of things, and it's less technically efficient than a design character for a very specific use case, but it's fine. So it does add a lot, and then you're going to deal with clipping, animation clipping. That's one of the big things. For me, for the longest time, I was like anti all clipping, and we spent way time trying to minimize clipping. And then I go and play.
And then you play a game.
New World. I'm like, they're clipping everywhere. What the hell? But you try to get rid of the major annoying clipping, and people accept certain other clipping. But it does add complexity and adds time put to one character, but it makes it so much more versatile. Because now, if somebody just wants to drag and drop it, they can do that. Now, if they just want drag and drop a few different looks, they can do that. And if they want to progression from I'm the new player and now I've got this armor on, now I've got beefier armor on, now I've got the beefiest armor on, you can do that as well. So you're increasing your market potential. You're also increasing the complexity and the support complexity as well. It's very easy to be able to say, this is the character, that's all it doesn't do anything else. And I've got 8 of them, and they're all slightly different. Now, if you could then say, but they all mix their heads, you can change the head from one to the other. Okay, well, now I've got some modularity. They all have the same body, and different wardrobe. Okay. But now again, you're increasing your complexity and your support costs and all that. So it really comes down to what you're able to do and what you're willing to support going forward.
I would say bare minimum, just make some texture sets that are slightly different with stripes and lines and things, and people will be happy. Like that is like the minimum step that goes, I think, a long way. Get 5 to 10 texture sets in there so people can have teams. You know,
and a few sub meshes for the wardrobe. Take the easiest ones, perhaps. You know, maybe not the whole shirt, but maybe just the vest versus not the vest, or the armor on the shoulders versus not the armor. Those ones are easy. Very little clipping there. Maybe when you do this a lot. But,
those kinds of things, I think they go a long way. And you got to remember that those things that are easy for you are the ones that are hard for the game designer and the programmer. Like going in and making a new texture that doesn't look like shit is not the easiest thing if you're not artistically skilled. Although if you're an artist and you go into Substance Painter, it might take you 30 seconds to make another cool variation, where somebody else is going to struggle, and they'll see a lot of value in it.
And the other one, like strong advice here for people: if you're going to go down this rabbit hole, go look at other games that do this first. And this isn't like for positive inspiration. If anything, it's the opposite, because what I mean is you'll sit there and make your thing and go, this is unacceptable. This clips, or it's wrong, or it's not good enough for the animation. And then you'll go and look at AAA big budget games and go, oh, they don't care that it clips, or they cut that corner. And it really makes you stop and recontextualize that some of this stuff is very, very complicated, and you just have to pick your battles. Like, what people don't realize is games like The Last of Us, for example, opening a door, I don't know what the exact number is, but that they put so much work into that the character opening a door, there's like, I think 60 or something different ways that a character can open a door, relative to if they're crouching, relative if they're standing, which angle they approach the door at. And so just the blending and structure for like the concept of open a door is very, very painful there. Now, granted, it's a very big part of the game in terms of sneaking around and picking things up, and so that's where you pick your appropriate battles. But because I do this all the time, I'll work on something and I'll be like, that's not good enough. I can see the flaws, I can see the issues. And then I'll go in a huge big thing where I look at like 30 different games and go, okay, am I setting myself a bar that not even bigger budget games are doing? And it's like, I am. This is unrealistic. And so you don't need to avoid clipping entirely. You have to avoid the kinds of clipping that is jarring and easy to fix. And if there is some kinds of clipping in edge cases, that's fine. And there are other hacks to solve that. Like a lot of games, what they'll do is they'll do things like clipping masks, where the object that won't clip through things, it'll just cut off and stop rendering. And so it looks wrong, but like it looks wrong, but not broken. And that is often good enough, right? So it comes down to what your goal is.
Yeah. I used to slow down the animations to the 10% speed and look for every little.
Yeah.
I told the story before. Like the moment that like woke me up to this was button. I wanted to make the best button the world has ever seen, and I was like, "What is the best button I remember ever seeing?" And I remember saying Portal. There was something so satisfying. It is a good size. It's easy to stand on. It's great for props and for player. It's very distinctive color-wise to the environment. It's clean. It's unique. It's stylized to the games world because it's like partially technical in terms of its like electronic design. It's also very affordant because when you press it, it lights up the button, its surface itself. And it's very physically interactive in that it's this nice, chunky, has weight. I put all of this. This is all the features I want in my perfect button system. And I started building it, and I built the ultimate button system. And I had this thing where like it was a weighted hinge button which had like pressure detection and all that stuff, and then I went back and I actually recorded a clip from Portal, and I'm like, oh, it's a trigger box. I can move something in and I could watch it play the animation of the click clink and whatever. I'm like, they don't have a tenth of the features of all the stuff that I assumed they did, because I vaguely remembered it, because I remembered it being very impressive. And that sort of made me question, how much is my memory? How much is the reality of it? How much is worth the effort? And then it just became like, okay, pick your battles. Because at the end of the day, none of the features I added actually made my thing better. It made it cooler. I could I have a little animated GIF where I drop various sized boxes and watch it like spring back into action and do different stuff. But unless my game is literally about pressing buttons, and even then, like it mightn't even be worth the effort. So if you think about that and think about character animations, where it's and this was the simplest concept: press button, trigger Boolean flag, right? If you try to take that level of mentality and approach it to character design and character animations, the amount of things, like what about your footsteps? Are you now going to go through and make sure every single animation has the appropriate trigger at the exact point of interaction on each footstep for each surface and match all of the like? And then if they're wearing heavier boots or lighter boots, are you going to go and change the specific? Like, no, there's a point you just have to ask yourself, where's the value add to the consumer in this? And oftentimes it's not there, you know?
Yeah, just don't show the feet. You're set.
That's right. Yeah, that's why you do a head above chest only, right?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, over engineering for sure. Yeah, it's always a big problem. I keep seeing posts about it online. It's the biggest problem I feel like game devs and programmers and artists all have, or they overdo everything. I mean, designers do it too. I watch Salim do some design stuff, and it's like it's sometimes the same exact scenario. Let's hit a couple more of these questions before we wrap things up. Do you know of any assets or tutorials for creating spline-based roads on a terrain? This popped up earlier. I was thinking about it, and I remember, I think it was Games from Scratch did a good video on this a couple months ago. It may have been like a full year ago. I'm not 100% sure though. I'm still, I need to look and dig it up. Do you guys remember any other ones though that were really good splines for road stuff?
So there's a lot of assets for that, but I think we talked about Microverse earlier, and there's literally one called Microverse Roads that looks like it's on sale right now. So maybe it just
came
out. And then there's Curvy Splines 8. So this Roads one came out September, so it's just on sale, probably part of the fresh assets. So there's that, and then the Curvy Splines 8 seems like it's the 8th version of a thing, so that's cool.
I wonder which one of those would be useful for learning from. It seems like they want to kind of learn how to do it. So I wonder if I feel like Microverse one. I mean, it might be, but it might be because it's kind of in that ecosystem. Might be difficult to do the full thing. But I'll link it in here. Have you seen any good video tutorials though on it? Yeah, Freya did one, but it wasn't on roads though. I don't think, was it? I saw the splines video, but I was thinking of a road specific one.
Well, even then, like the question is like, what is the real problems here? You can break, because this goes back to like these are multifactorial things, right?
Right. Well, let's assume that I assumed that they already know kind of how to do a spline. Was I guess my thought, but maybe that was a wrong assumption.
Well, yeah. Well, I was just saying, like, so in step order, this is like one, you want splines. What are splines? You create points, and then you round the edges of points by having intermediate points, and then creating beziers. Then, if you want them to be roads, create the spline above a surface, raycast down, and snap it to the appropriate surface. You now have spline on surface. Then, if you want it to be a road, you create a mesh builder, and you basically distribute along that, whatever mesh shape you want, and you can construct whatever shape you'd want geometry wise, and then there's supporting edge cases and corners and whatever else, or you can distribute shapes along a mesh if it's not as important. So I guess again it's a bit broader than like what's a good solution with it. It comes down to like if you're building an infinite runner game, you'd use a different road system than if you were building say you wanted to build a RTS game and you wanted to have roads built for that, or if you wanted some kind of automated road system. For that one, you're better off using a grid and building the intermediate grid lines and then trying to like attach them between those. So again, it comes down to what you're trying to make, I would say.
I just found some Twisted Liver mentioned that Freya did do a road one too, and it looks like it's this one. It's 6 hours long. Looks like it's live, going over procedural generation. I think, is this it? I thought this is what showed up when I was looking. I don't know. If you got a different one though, link it. I'll just link her whole channel too. We're gonna go check it out.
Yeah.
Is outside of my my skill set though. When I get into splines and the math stuff, it's all good for like the first hour or so, and then my brain starts to fall apart. I'm like, all right, I've totally gotten lost now, and I struggle with it.
Whenever I do anything, I've talked before. Geometry, trigonometry, math, that type of math stuff. Rotations, out the window. So now my first step is to definitely have ChatGPT 4 up and ready to go when I'm working on anything like that.
I'm doing my daily brilliant .net or whatever that thing every day now, trying to get better at maths because prison.org. Yeah, I've been doing my maths quizzes because same thing. It's just the area that I'm most uncomfortable with, and so I'm going through the multiple layers of, post college level maths. I never really did. You pick up some stuff on the job, as they say, but like academically getting the right answers for this stuff, it's not my instinct at all.
Well, I never thought, in high school, I took geometry and I got bad grades, but I didn't have to take math after that. So as long as I got a C minus, I was done. And then I didn't take any math except for math for liberal arts in college at the community college, to be fair. And so that was the extent of it, because I thought I will never need to know anything about trigonometry and geometry. I mean, I know what a square is, I know right angles. I wouldn't need to know that. And then I got into game development and I'm like, oh, I want to make my character turn.
Like, oh, it's actually useful for some. That's why I wish they would do that in school. Do a little bit of maybe game math. Maybe as a class. Like if game math was a class and it was, you learn math in game scenarios. Right. I feel like it would, not that it would necessarily teach people better, but it would probably encourage a lot more people to take it seriously and be kind of interested and engaged when you see the real world like situation use for it, even though it's virtual, but it's still like an actual use case for it.
Well, it goes back to when we talked before about you were looking for game ideas. The first one to ever really teach me math was a tower defense game, because I was really uncomfortable. I think I mentioned this before. When I was in school, I switched schools 3 different times when I moved houses. And so if you do that and you happen to be gone even for a few months at the wrong time, which I was, it was right smack bang in the middle of coordinate geometry, which, as everybody knows, is fundamental to almost everything else downstream, especially when you're learning that stuff early on for spatial, any kind of understanding of positional stuff. And as I was catching up with that, obviously the class moves on forward without me. And so I went from higher maths to lower maths just because of those few months of mistransition, because that was enough for me to go, I can do it, but I'm so far behind that the catch-up rate is too slow to kind of keep on board with what people are currently learning. Anyway, the point is, I started teaching myself programming stuff at one stage, because they only really taught horrible languages in college. They were teaching Java and VB.NET, and I was very annoyed, and I wanted to make games, and so I taught myself C# and Java and ActionScript, because that's what at the time people were making games in. And so while I was doing that, I built tower defense games, and tower defense games to me were perfect for this, because the math, in retrospect, is very easy. It was hard for me at the time, but now it's like, oh, it's basic. It teaches you grounding of vectors and basic angles and understanding even things like slope of a line and for calculating rotations and arcs and stuff. It's like, why would I ever need this? Well, this is why I need this. Because if you want to do a parabola to like actually arc something, you have to know what the line is and the slopes and stuff. So understanding this stuff was like, oh, this is actually much better, because now I can make rockets, and how do I make the rockets heat seek? And then once you get over that level and move into the other areas of like physics and stuff, you're going, okay, I can do maths, but physics is still beyond me. It's like, well, actually, you've done the math, but you just use the same vectors, but now they represent acceleration and velocity, and you kind of work your way in that direction. And then suddenly you kind of move yourself into more complicated topics. So to me, I think like something like a tower defense game, which has like basic curves, following points, shooting things, that to me was the difference between me like failing maths and being able to do it okay.
Yeah, I feel like you could do like a good math class just based off of that, like where the whole class for the whole semester or quarter or whatever is just going through the different parts of building a tower defense thing, and they're just doing the math for it and figuring that out. Like that would be interesting, I think, and engaging to students, like get them kind of in there to want to learn those things so that they can add the thing into the next part. But
and for me, the most exciting thing I ever learned in maths is actually really dumb relative to all of that. You'd make a lot of stuff and it would feel like, here's a good example. You see people doing things like making Pong inside of Excel. Kind of weird, pointless, but like, and you're kind of thinking, how did they do that? Like I did the same thing with WinForms, like WinForms is text boxes, and I would have the text boxes themselves be the paddles. It was just dumb, like experiments. And I'd look at that and I go, how do people make particle systems in things that aren't designed for particle systems? That makes no sense. Now, once you learn that stuff, it's like, it's actually 4 lines of a basic Euler integration, or in the case of animated stuff, it's just Ising curves. But again, the part that really like broke my brain is, this is amazing, is learning how Ising works. because it's one of those things where, because if you're not good at math or even UI or any of that stuff, you can make stuff and go, all my stuff looks really clunky. It's very static and jerky and doesn't really have a lot of organicness to it and feels off. But the minute you learn how to ease things and how simple it is, and just the basic, like, it is the simplest equation in the world, and if you understand it, it becomes something where it's like, this is exponential. This same thing is how you make Bezier curves, which circles back to what we were saying earlier. If you understand an easing function, you can make a road mesh conceptually downstream from there. But it's also used for all the other stuff. Like if you want to make a UI that feels really satisfying to animate things in and out. And so for me, the day that I clicked for me, it's like, oh, it's just subtract my destination multiplied by time. And it's like, oh, it's like 4 numbers. And once I had that and I understood it and I could apply it, it was like, suddenly every time I wanted to make something, I could optionally slap an animation curve on it, or I could optionally ease it, and suddenly everything I made looks slicker, looks smoother, feels better. I feel more proud of the work I'm doing. All the movements look better. All of the even things like, how would I figure this out? Well, you can always get the 2 positions and then ease your way along the line, and you can like do things like distribute points and generators. So just easing as a concept opens the door to like, oh, this is actually pretty straightforward. It's how you generate curves. It's how you distribute objects. It's how you use noise functions. It's how you use procedural generation. It's how you can do, like, so it's the smallest equations that tend to have the biggest kind of outsized impact. And oftentimes I see if you try to approach it top down, it's like, this is intractable. I can't even begin this stuff. But the ones that really like got it for me was vectors, distance check stuff, and dot product, that kind of area, and then easing functions. If you understand those 2, it's not all the stuff in the world, but it'll get you so far that all the other stuff will start to slowly chip away in a much easier way.
Yeah, I learned it all through electronics. I felt like it was much harder trying to figure all this stuff out and understand the concepts with math through there. I mean, obviously some of it doesn't apply on the electronic side, but a lot of it did with the stuff that is still makes my brain hurt.
Yeah, like I remember I did electronics in school too. I remember they were teaching the truth tables. And I remember going, I hate this. This is nonsense. Just like bunch of numbers and weird equations and stuff. And I didn't really get it or why they were doing it. But then you play Minecraft and you build your, redstone gates. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's an OR, that's an AND, that's an adder. It's like, this is so obvious and easy because I'm like toggling things. This makes sense. And it's amazing how trying to teach it through a grid of numbers is so silly in relation to the fact that show me a switch that opens either a door or this, and then give me a challenge of going, make it open both, make it open only if both switches are on. It's like suddenly it's so easy to understand if you're like playing with the concepts.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun and interesting stuff. It just needs to be made more fun and not be just random numbers you're doing on a paper and trying to understand and figure out what for. But I don't know. I always like teaching through games, so I feel like it works well if it's done well and it's not just doesn't get transformed into just playing games. So you gotta be careful for that, but it certainly can work really well, especially I think teaching through making games. If you can avoid it being too complicated.
And AI as well is a good one for this too, like really, really basic AI, because AI lets people try to solve problems. I go back to the steering behaviors examples, the Reynolds paper. That's one of those ones where it starts to get more complicated, but fundamentally bird flocking or any of those simulation type things, they all return to the same, again, 4 equations roughly. But to get the more advanced behaviors and movements, like shells of fish moving together or birds sort of flocking in groups or separating or whatever, there's names for these. There's arrival, flee, cohesion, separation, whatever. But each one is just roughly do some equation, get some vectors, average them out, return a new number. Like running away is just move towards but backwards, right?
Yes. So, invert to times -1.
Yeah, and so you've got like seek is just move directly towards at all times, never stop. But if you overshoot, how do you arrive at your destination slowly? Well, it's like, well, how do I know how much I have to slow down by? Well, you do. You have the distance value that's changing over time, and so you can start to go, what if I multiply something by that distance to tell me like a reversing force to stop me? It's like, oh, well, suddenly like each of these things iterate and step in a way that, and then it goes back to the AI example. You can now go, what if I wanted this to chase this but avoid these, but then try to get to that? You're like, well, then you just stack all of the equations together and watch the ensuing behavior. So for me, learning the AI stuff was really cool because you could sit there and go, wouldn't it be cool if that thing chased this thing, and what if it could do this or fire bullets at that? Now you can try to solve the problems and sort of build yourself towards the math for it.
I'm just thinking more about this too. Just thinking like the amount of math that you have to use for most stuff, though, like 99% of things is like that very basic stuff, like you were mentioning, add and subtract and multiply. And once you realize that when you do it with a vector, how that works, it's relatively straightforward as well, adding and multiplying vectors. You get past those points, that's like the core of like 99% of the math that you do, until you get into solving a couple specific problems, or obviously shader stuff. You end up doing quite a bit more.
It's also not where you think it is too, right? Like if I was to say to you the entirety of Minecraft world generation versus some mildly nice looking water, the math for the mildly nice looking water is infinitely more complex than the math for the Minecraft generation. Not
Yes.
in like, because in the Minecraft generation stuff, you're basically talking about generate some positions, apply various layers of noise, and each equation is usually a pre-baked set of equations with some custom values and sliders and whatever. They can get more complicated, but like fundamentally, if you wanted to generate your own infinite Minecraft world, you don't have to learn a lot to do that. But if you want to do good looking water, then again, you have to learn so much about how light's going to hit the surface and refract. Now again, each equation is not difficult, but you get to that point that you're solving so many problems because you're building up a domain.
You said good looking water. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you just, and then even things like and that goes back to what I said earlier too, is you could have the water be invisible, but if you just want something to bob in the water, the body simulation physics, that's a different set of equation for buoyancy. Buoyancy is actually a pretty simple equation. It's literally, again, like 3 or 4 different variables. It's not that hard, but it's also completely unrelated to the rendering of the water. So even though you'd probably assume without looking into it, making things float in water would be harder than making the water look nice, but building waves on the water is harder than it is to make things float in the water. But then if you want things to float on the waves, the hard part isn't the floating on the waves. The hard part is like marshalling the positional data of where the curves are for the height maps. And so it gets interesting. It's a complicated set of stuff. But again, all of the main stuff, bullets, trajectories, basic AI movement, traversing, smoothing, procedural generation, even mesh generations, like we talk about road and stuff. So much of that is actually mind-blowingly simple. Particle systems, you could write your own from scratch particle system if you didn't want to use Unity's, and you'd be surprised how far you'd get with just the basics, because all a particle is a vector position plus some rendering information, right? It's all it really is. And once you start to build this stuff up, again, basic acceleration and velocity and whatever, all of this, because this stuff used to scare the crap out of me. And it wasn't until I started going down this road of trying to solve small problems that I was like, you just have to see it from the context of small pieces building up.
Oh yeah, that's how all this stuff gets created in the first place. All right, let's see. I wanted to take this one real quick, and then maybe we'll start to wrap stuff up. GDC predictions, that was in my title because I wanted to talk about it. So there's I would say a reasonably strong chance that I'll actually be at GDC again this year. I'd say it's
nice.
Looking very likely. Probably not for the entire week though. Probably just for like 3 days or something like that. Predictions though, my expectation is that we're going to see well, first off, a ridiculous amount of AI things. I expect that most of the smaller booths are, or at least maybe not most, but a large portion of the smaller booths and medium-sized ones are going to be AI startups and companies that are doing something new AI related and trying to show that off. And I kind of expect it to also be just kind of scaled down a little bit this year versus last year on kind of the flashiness and the stuff. I mean, maybe not, but who knows? Epic did just get like $150 billion or something. maybe they're gonna spend $1 billion on their display again. And their display last year was nuts. I don't know if you saw the pictures and videos of it, but it was huge. Took up like what would normally be like 3 or 4 people's like big display areas, and then it was multi-story and stuff. So it was giant. I expect that those will probably be kind of scaled back, is my guess, that people aren't going to be spending as much money on that stuff, and will be spending more pushing the AI things, pushing some educational stuff. I know at least a couple places are looking at doing some educational things there. Well, I mean, GDC in general is supposed to be kind of educational with all the talks, but outside of that, I'm hoping to see some interesting new VR and AR tech. I expect like that there will be a couple things that I haven't seen or tried out yet there that'll be really cool. But I don't know exactly what those are going to be. And then I'm really, I don't know if there's anything else that yeah. What you got? Any thoughts? I'll let you go for a second.
Honestly, not really. I sort of get more and more disillusioned with these events because, as you said, they may have been originally phrased as sort of educational. It just tends to be now a lot more. It's a marketing event that people sort of gear up for in a lot of cases. And like, as you said, we all know what the current trends are. I'm not particularly interested in 60 different AI startups talking about their various things. And the other side of it too is the current doom and gloom in the industry on a AAA side means a lot of the talks are probably going to be more veiled around the direction of career and safety and stuff, how things are going and what people are thinking about certain stuff in that area too. I don't know.
For me, the talks have never been at GDC, at least, have never been that appealing. You can watch a lot of the sessions online. There's some great ones there, but 9 out of 10 of them are just things that are totally unrelated to me. You know, to be like about being a marketing manager, or dealing with your team, or some rendering thing in an engine that I'm never going to use. It's like, it's neat and cool seeing what they did, but it's not like educational in a way that I'm going to actively use it. Kind of like Unite was always like that. Like I would go in and be like, come out, okay, I have stuff I can use and I'm going to do. GDC is not, the talks aren't so much like that. Some of them are, but the majority aren't. It's more the hall for me.
The problem with GDC talks for me is that GDC talks are often retrospectives. They're not tutorials. And so you get a lot of really interesting insights into, we are company X made game Y. Here's our story, but here's the untold story that you didn't hear, which will be very interesting. But it's a lot of stuff like, again, one of the most famous talks from the about Unity side of stuff was, I go back to the Unity one, but was Playdead's talk about, here's how we got stutter-free performance, blah, blah, blah. But when your opening gambit is, so we have access to the source of the engine and we good at half the things, it's like, well, immediately that's not as applicable to people. And GDC is often right. So we use our own internal engine. We've got a team of talented people who've been working on this for years. Here's how we do stuff. It's like, well, I can't really take a lot of that home with me, right? There are some particularly good ones. Like there's a really good one from Valve talking about how they do dialogue barks and stuff. And I also really like the ones that talk about their internal teams that nobody knows about. Things like people who have cultural advisors and stuff that small studios never think about. Like if you're going to represent another country in your game, there are things you have to know, and like cultural things you have to understand with how you design, even things like architectural stuff and decisions and various things like that. I really find those talks fascinating. Or other fields, people who were architects first who became level designers, who approach it from a different angle than people who are naturally in the industry, or technical problems you have to solve, like balancing games that are certain types, because the skills you acquire balancing a first-person shooter are not the same skills you'll acquire balancing an RTS economy system or something. So there's a lot of really interesting talks, but as you said, one, you can check them out online, and two, you can't go into them and know which ones are going to be valuable, and you're very rarely going to get something actionable out of it. It's often more broadly understanding and research than specific actions. And for me, I watch them to kind of get buzzwords to then search later from people who've like added their sources where to go to. And the event itself, I've not been myself. I was going to go twice, but both times something fell apart. But it just doesn't super appeal to me, because I've been to a lot of trade show events and things that show kind of brand new on the floor things, but it's such a hype fest of like, look at the cool stuff we're doing, that I'm there to have fun with people I know, but the actual event itself tends to just be like a fun thing to look at when you're hanging out with your friends. For me, there's very little excitement on the floor in terms of the actual value of the proposition. Yeah,
That's fair. For me, it's all the excitement is kind of on the expo floor. It is, and it's largely around. There are two things that I really like there. One is seeing a bunch of cool tech, like actually getting to demo it and try it out. It's usually, at least on days other than Friday, not that crowded. I think Friday is like the student day, so it gets super crowded. But the other days, it's not usually that crowded. You get in there pretty early. You can go try things out. It's not like E3 where you got to go stand in line for 4 hours to try something out. Most of the things you can kind of like walk up, check it out, and see it within a few minutes and get a demo from the people who've made the thing. I really like the hardware ones specifically. Sometimes I'll go through and try out some of the games, the ones that look interesting and appealing, and there's usually something there that's kind of cool. But it's for me,
I admit,
the hardware.
on that note, one thing I do like is oftentimes if you go to a booth, which is something of like, again, either hardware or a particular game or something, I always look to see the most awkward looking person at the stand, because they're often the engineer as opposed to the person who's been hired for marketing.
Yes.
And oftentimes if you can corner them, you can have a fun chat. And that's often really fun because you can say, hey, you made this. Yeah, actually, so we did this thing. We had this technical problem. And you can get some really fun conversations going with people who are actively making these things. Those are definitely great fun. But I do think the problem I have is so much of this stuff gets shown and then you never see it again. Or if you do see it again, you don't see it again for a year or something, or then if something comes out, it's different than what it was. So I've just been burned so many times being hyped on something, and then I go home and I just sort of wait to kind of hear about it again, or I hear what the release is. And it's like, again, the actionability of all of this stuff is so low because it's either not related to you, or if it is related to you, it's concepts, or it's so early in development, or it's something which is like testing how people are reacting to it. So I don't know.
Some of them, I'd say at GDC, there's also a lot of live, like actual things that are out now that have been released like in the last year or so that I just didn't know about too, like different hardware devices. I mean, like the Tilt 5 was one of them that really stood out. I saw that walking by. I was just off in the corner, no idea what it was. Wouldn't have even noticed it if the guy hadn't pulled me over there. But walked over and looked, and I was like, "Oh, this is freaking cool!" Like I had no idea this tech even existed, and they had them, available. And I went back to the hotel room and ordered one, and I was like, "Oh, I got to get one of these. This is cool."
I guess to be fair, a lot of the events I go to tend to be a lot more industry events for whatever industry I'm in at the time, and so, for example, things like those things. Like when you're in VR, for example, all the events are people showing off the VR stuff. But if you know the industry and you know people, you've either heard the rumors or you played with the prototypes or you have the prototypes. And so going to those events tends to be a lot less interesting. So I guess, more broadly, if it's areas or fields that you're not presently in or stuff that's like you might not have heard of, I can see that being a lot more interesting.
Yeah, that was me. Like for me, it's seeing all those cool things that like I wouldn't have seen otherwise or noticed that. And then the other part that's probably even more valuable, and there was a question here from the Bull about what solo or indie devs, new devs should get from GDC. The networking, it's the talking to people. I mean, when I'm there, I'm like talking until my voice runs out. I've got my little flag from school earlier. I'll pop that sucker on. It was rolled up in my lap. Anyway, talking to other people, other developers, seeing what they're doing, making new friends and connections is always great. And then, like you said, a lot of the time you get to talk to, the engineers that are solving actual problems, and then get some interesting stories and see what's going on there. And that's the part that I think is probably the most valuable, is just making a bunch of new connections and friendships there and stuff. I mean, the seeing tech is cool too, but I would rate that as second.
Yeah, I admit that's always been my favorite bit. Is again, I'll look for something that's, weirdly enough, a lot of people will go to the stuff that's new to them or kind of interesting. I'll actually look for something I know stuff about, because I want to go to the stands of things which I have some interest or some knowledge in, so that I can talk to a tech person, so that I can banter back and forth and find out like how they're doing stuff, or it's different than what I know or what they've got. And oftentimes people who, if you've dedicated your life to making something and then you're demonstrating it at an event, you're excited to talk about it, providing you'll get two kinds of questions. You'll get the, oh, what is it? Nobody knows questions, and they're exhausting because you're basically parroting the same sentence every 50 seconds for every person that comes by. But then you'll get the occasional tech person who'll come in and go, oh, are you doing it this way or this way? It's like, actually, we were going to do it that way, but it didn't work for this. And it's like, they love talking about that stuff because that's where they get to actually gush about whatever is unique about what they're doing. And so they enjoy it, you enjoy it, and that's where you end up coming away with business cards and contacts and people you can meet in Discords and communities later. So yeah, I do a lot of that. That to me is the most fun part because you can also see it too. The personal passion of mine is I like watching where somebody has been having to give the same presentation for the last 3 hours, and you can see the like life draining from their eyes, and they're so uninterested. And then you can just walk up and go, "How long have you been doing this for?" Like, so long. It's been so boring. Like, then you can have a chat to them just as a person without them having to like turn on the spiel and stuff, and that's just fun as well because it's a great way to again meet people.
Let's take this one real quick and go. But Bull was asking if it's worth the price. I just looked because I wasn't sure what the Expo Hall price is.
Yeah, how much is it actually?
It's only $299 for the Expo Hall access. The thing that's important though is that the hotel rooms are more than that every single night. Really, that's $299. That's like half of a night at a hotel room if you want to be in walking distance, probably. That is by far the big, and obviously driving in and out of San Francisco in the morning is probably terrible. Maybe you can get an Uber and it's not bad, and you can get a hotel that's not unreasonable. But $299 seems pretty good for the. I mean, you get full access to the week of the Expo Hall, and I mean, you could easily spend 2 full days just going down if you're actually paying attention, looking at all the stuff and checking it out. You'd easily spend 2 days on the Expo Hall floor just looking at stuff. I mean, it takes a couple hours just to go through the whole thing, just kind of speed walking around.
This is really hard to do because you need someone properly organized and a relatively trustworthy group of people. But if you are in that position, and you, especially if you're younger and have a lot of friends you can chat to, one of the best things you can do, start a Discord group or whatever, get a whole bunch of people together that all agree they want to go, figure out how much money you can pool together between you. And what you can often do is you can go and get like you can rent somewhere that's like slightly further
Grab
out.
an Airbnb or something.
Exactly. That's a bit cheaper, but has like we used to do that with like 12 rooms, like a pretty big spot, and we'd cram like whatever 14 people in, and then we'd bundle our money, and then we'd all get in the morning in the same vehicle or whatever, 1 or 2 vehicles, and that way you only need 1 or 2 people who can drive, so you don't have to pay for expensive taxis or whatever. You can just get 1 or 2 people because I couldn't drive. Then
you're not going to be driving in San Francisco anyway.
Whatever. This is more broadly any event to get into wherever it is you're trying to get to, right? Stay somewhere outside, and you can drive to wherever your local transit stuff is. But the point is, it's cheaper on bulk that way. But also, the more important part, in my opinion, is if you're in town somewhere, you're going to want to hang out and have fun. And if you have to go back to wherever it is you're going afterwards, it's such a energy killer to be like, I'm having a lot of fun, but it's a long trip back, and I have to leave now if I want to get back. If you have a group with you, you can say, hey, we all have a place we can go hang out in. You can then have somewhere that kind of retains the energy afterwards, and then people can hang out together. And then you all know you're not going to miss going to the next event because everyone's going to wake each other up. You're going to get together and you're going to go in again for the next day or whatever it is you're doing. So this is, I just mean broadly, if you have the resources to do it, your life will be easier, both in long-term organizing it, the fun of the energy, the events and stuff, is if you can go with a bunch of people. Otherwise, you kind of get the problems that Jason was saying, where you're like, it's super expensive in the middle, and it's to be honest, that extra scaling and price isn't really worth it. So all the most fun I've had has been when we had like 10 to 14 people and we agree in advance. It's messy to set up in advance, but it's much easier to set up somebody in charge of money in a Discord group or a WhatsApp or something, get everyone together, get money, get everyone to buy tickets, arrange a place, have everyone move, and then once you've got that done, all the hard work and legwork's done up front. Now managing people is much simpler when you're going in together afterwards.
Totally agree. I'm looking right now at the the Airbnbs in that area, but I don't know how to change the date for the future because I'm sure that the price on these like quadruples the week of GDC. But yeah, do you want to be in walking distance? I would say to the expo ideally, if you can, because there's lots of little events. And then the question here is: the expo the only part worth doing? The other passes are 1,000 plus. I wouldn't personally spend 1,000 plus on the other ones, just because, like I said, I feel like I like the expo hall floor a lot better. Going into the sessions, I think we already kind of talked through that, and then the summits are basically just more sessions. It's just sessions on Monday and stuff. So I wouldn't pay 1,000 just for those either. Unless, I mean, if you want to go to the summit ones, probably slightly more educational, but still, if cost is an issue, I would just, the expo hall is probably more than enough. It's all, yeah.
Plus, again,
the other part is just same people, just in a different area, talking about something more specific.
Yeah, and again, it can't fact for everybody, but for me, like, even when I would have more things I can go to, I often feel so antsy when I'm sitting there at like an hour or two talk, because I'm like, I could be meeting people, this isn't where the value is for me personally, and it often feels like I actually regret sitting in on more events. So oftentimes what I do is I'll earmark 4 or 5 that I really want to go to, or if I do, and then I'll mark 3 or 4 that I would go to if the time happens to align, and then I kind of like gradiate them for myself. And that way, if I'm wandering around, I'll favor dealing with people. But if I hit a moment where I'm like, I'm bored, or I actually just want to sit down for a while because it's been very high communication energy or whatever, I can look at what the nearest talk is and go, oh, actually, I gave that one a interest level 3 out of 5. Why not? I wouldn't have normally gone to it, but it happens to align where my energy is right now. So for me, pre-planning like yeses, nos, maybes, and then kind of helps a lot,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just keep track of the things that are most important, but or the ones you definitely want to go to. But at GDC, like I said, for me, it's not so much about the talks. It's just those expo hall things that are going on and some of the external stuff that's happening that's more exciting. But yeah, it's fun anyway. If you're going, shoot me a message and maybe we'll meet up there. Other than that, I think we probably wrap stuff up. Just tell everybody, Andrew's gone, in case anybody didn't notice. Disappeared, his internet died. And if you haven't joined Jason Story's Discord server, the link is right there in the chat. There's awesome discussions in there all the time. By the way, have you talked to Yorai lately? I messaged Yorai earlier, but I haven't heard back.
Yeah, a couple days ago, not recently though.
Okay, I just want to make sure everything's okay there. I haven't heard back, and just it's been a little while since we've had a Yorai appearance on here. So make sure everything's cool over there. No internet outages and other stuff. And then the other things. Let's see. Was there other stuff? Oh, if you haven't checked out the Fresh sale, go check that out. Oh, and before I forget, the Publisher of the Week. Can't say what's going on there exactly, but this week there's a new asset just went out today. It's a sound pack, but next week they're doing a big thing and they're going to be giving away 5 assets. So instead of 1, it's like a big thing. I don't know if they're doing this again later this year or not, or if it's just a one-time thing, but they're going to have a big publisher thing and 5 assets next week. So make sure that you're ready and watching that. They come out every Thursday. I'll post something about it, I'm sure. And then finally, for multiplayer mastery course students, the NPC lessons have started going up today. I'm trying to get them all up with all the code today. And we've got our next live call Monday morning at 9 a.m. So we got NPCs.
I missed yesterday's one, didn't I? Because I remember it was supposed to be Fridays, and it's Thursdays, and I keep forgetting. So
yeah. So we're back. We're set to Monday and Thursday now, just so evenly spaced throughout the week. And yeah, in this one, I'd be really curious to get your thoughts on it. Once the whole thing's up, I'll send you a message, and maybe I'll just do a quick little demo and run you through it. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts on the NPC system. It's essentially one of the core things that I was trying to focus on and cover is that NPCs are just non-player characters and PCs are player characters, and that they all are a character, and that all of their shared common systems can be the same shared common system. So NPCs use the same ability system, the same inventory, the same buff system, and everything else as players. So when you hook them up, they just work. You give them items, they use the items. You give them abilities, they use the abilities, that kind of stuff. And then if you want to kill them, it's the same as killing a player, drop all the items and all that stuff. So I think that it's an important thing that people mistake and mess up a lot of the time. I know I did when I began, but then I started to see some of the bigger projects I was working on that had this in those games. Sorry for the tangent, but in all the MMOs, there were NPCs were like a subclass. So you had like a character and then player character and NPCs. But because it was in C++, we had multiple inheritance and it was workable. I feel like That's not. I'm much more a fan of the componentized system where everything is the same and there's no difference there. And then for NPCs, you just add a little bit of extra logic onto the thing that's controlling it. Because it was after running through and seeing all of the problems, like, hey, you want to be able to control an NPC? All right, well, let's go hack in all of this stuff. Hey, I want to be able to charm a player. Let's go hack in all of this stuff. And you get rid of all of that just by using a shared unified setup for that stuff. So anyway, that's my long rant. But I'd be curious to just get your thoughts on that stuff sometime.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're basically on the same page there too. Anyway, the only two things I would say as a caution is you get games like World of Warcraft, which famously have issues because if they do follow the same rules as the players, you can manipulate some of those systems. You have to make sure that you bypass some stuff by like giving NPCs huge numbers of things that would bypass certain things, the break checks or whatever. Or the other side of it too is from a performance standpoint, there are some things you can cut out, things like a player character controller needs all of the character controller physics stuff when an NPC can be a capsule in some cases, right? So there are certain things there that you can simplify. But yeah, for all of the abilities, for data-driven stuff, 99.9% of the stuff, it's so much easier to just have them be a player but not, and then have a brain of some kind that swaps out, that detects how to calculate decisions and for various movements and whatever.
Yeah, get a much more usable system and way less bugs long term, right? You don't end up with all this.
Yeah, when I put to tangent on that, I don't want to go too crazy, but this also applies even to just other stuff like racing games. Why try to figure out a really complicated racing AI thing when you can instead calculate inputs for the controller? Like literally, if you can basically say how long me as AI should I press the accelerate button, the brake button, or should I move, means all you need is a sensor system and then hook into the exact same input provider. And that means that if a player wants to control a vehicle, you can one-click swap as well. And then even more advanced stuff, like say you had a tank which has really custom tank treads and controls and stuff. How do you control it? You could try to be really complicated and try to solve all the problems, or feed it the same inputs, have something move, and have the more complicated system follow the simpler system. And then now you've done exactly the same thing and you've bypassed all the complexity. So yeah, in a lot of cases, I will try to distill things down into use ability / move in direction / receive inputs, and then all of the complexity comes down to deriving those values and numbers and decision making, but the actual controller and system is same as a player or whatever.
Oh yeah, I totally. Yeah, it's like on the racing ones, you're giving it like a target in the some little spot off in the distance. Like this is your next point. Get to there, and it's apply throttle and turn the right way. Like, yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Make sure that you tap the thumbs up button, subscribe, and drop us comments, questions if you got them. And also don't forget to check out the podcast version up on Spotify, iTunes, and all of the other podcast stuff. I'm still going through and uploading episodes. It takes a long time. We're on 164 here, so getting caught up with them. But go, please subscribe, follow them, and all those, and leave a review if you like the show. If you don't like the show, then just hit the thumbs up button instead. Anyway, all right. Thanks again, everybody. We will see you again next week. I find my goodbye button.